Mississippi, 1871. The ghost boy science can't explain. In 1871, the Finch family in Jennings adopted a silent child through the state orphan registry. The boy never spoke, never disobeyed, and never aged. After 2 years, they returned him, with no complaints, no injuries, no formal rejection paperwork, just a slip of paper that read, "No longer compatible." Decades later, a prison intake record listed a boy of identical appearance, an identical name, still 9 years old. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're ready to step into the story of the Finch family and the child they sent back. And if you're listening right now, let me know what country you're in and what time it is. There's a comfort in knowing that we're all out there, scattered across timelines, watching the same story unfold together. The first mention appears in the Jennings County Orphan Intake Ledger, Volume 4, page 192, male, estimated age 8 to 9, origin unknown, delivered by itinerant officer, confirmed by Clark B. Smalls, does not speak, does not resist, has no name. Instead, a temporary designation, child 13, B. The officer's signature is smudged, but the loop at the tail of the G in agent matches a field supervisor stationed in nearby Vernon. His travel log for that week has been lost. The Carver family, Thomas and Eliza Carver, they were childless, owned a prosperous cotton plantation, and were respected figures in Natchez society. They were approved for adoption by the parish council, under a provision for families of moral and financial stability, an effort to relieve the burden on the overflowing almshouse. However, their adoption record in the registry showed an anomaly. From the start, though it was a single adoption, the entry for Ward 9 Kelvin showed signs of tampering. The initial entry was written in standard black ink, but just a few lines below, a second entry was added, in a different dark brown ink, stating, "Subject 9 Kelvin, status updated." There was no date, no explanation. Beside this second entry, a very faint, handwritten note in charcoal pencil appeared in the margin, "Portrait unchanged, verified by Mirror." The only known photograph from this period is a daguerreotype, found wedged between the pages of one of Thomas Carver's ledgers. It shows a boy, sitting upright on a hard wooden chair, his hands placed neatly on his lap, his gaze fixed unnervingly on the lens. The photo bears no name, no date, but its copper backing is engraved with the small mark of an itinerant French artist, known to have traveled the Mississippi River around 1826. It was rumored he lost all his equipment in a mysterious boat capsizing near Vicksburg. Shortly thereafter, no other photographs of the boy have been found. His image never appeared in parish announcements or city bulletins. The Natchez Almshouse's annual report for 1825 makes no mention of a transfer to the Carver family, although Thomas Carver, in a letter to his business partner, confirmed they had taken the boy from the parish facility with a small stipend and formal approval, dated the 4th of June. Thomas's handwriting, famously decisive and clear in his cotton contracts, became shaky and cramped in his personal notes about the child. The loops of his letters tightened, the spacing between words uneven. In an entry dated 1827, he wrote, "It does not ask, it does not sleep. I sometimes find it standing by the window looking out at the river, motionless for hours. I have stopped asking what it wants." Eliza Carver left no correspondence, but in her household ledger, there is a small entry for a fabric purchase. She bought 3 identical bolts of linen, enough for a boy's attire, but with no specific measurements, only a note beside it, to keep unchanged. There are no records of illness, destruction, or complaints. No letters were sent to the parish council. On the 21st of September, 1828, the child was returned to the Natchez Almshouse. The return record lists the reason in a single phrase, "unsuitable." There was no precedent for this phrasing in Mississippi records before that time. The parish clerk, whose initials are on the document, later swore in a land inquiry that he had no memory of processing such a return, and that the handwriting, though similar to his, looked foreign, as if written by another hand guiding my own. The corresponding page in his personal journal was smudged by a water stain, rendering any details illegible. Immediately after the Carvers returned the child, a new file was created for the boy. That very day, this file was identical to the old one in every respect, the same child, the same age, but this time he was given a name, Ezra Cole. The paperwork states he was transferred to a church in Vicksburg, but no document proves this transfer ever occurred. At the bottom of the file page, a very faint, handwritten line, seemingly added later. It reads, "It was not sent. It was just released back to the river." The Carvers' residence was a large plantation house overlooking the Mississippi River. There are no records of any disturbances or damage to the house during the boys' stay. According to tax records, Thomas and Eliza Carver were model citizens. However, in their 1827 census return, there is an oddity. Next to the couple's names, there is an additional entry for a ward with no date of birth or other information. An X is marked in the ability to speak column, but there is no confirming signature from anyone. There were no reports on the boy's behavior, and the diary of the local pastor, who regularly visited families, is missing the pages covering that period. The only evidence of the boy's life here comes from a relative's letter. She wrote, "The Carver's quiet child has a strange habit. Every afternoon he goes and stands by the garden fence, silently watching the river until it is fully dark." Among the few Carver family possessions preserved at the Natchez Historical Society is a leather-bound notebook belonging to Eliza Carver. It was found in an old jewelry box, auctioned in 1855 after the mansion was abandoned. The notebook mostly contains notes on household management, recipes, and plantation expenses, but interspersed between notes on cotton prices and weather from May 1826 to August 1828 are 12 entries, written in a hurried hand, indirectly referring to the child. Eliza never names him, using only it or the presents. May 11, it is always awake before dawn, standing still in the dark parlor. The 2nd of July, the oil lamp in its room is out again, though I am certain I filled it. There is no smell of smoke. The 19th of September, it does not speak, but it seems to know what I am about to ask. It just shakes its head slightly before I can open my mouth. Its eyes are always fixed on a point just over my shoulder. The 4th of December, I gave it a seashell I found on the riverbank. It did not look at the shell, but only held it in its palm. A moment later, I had a chilling feeling, as if a whisper was echoing from the shell. A short, undated note, written in pencil, is tucked between two pages that are nearly stuck together. It reads, "It knows when we are not watching. That is when the shadows in the room shift." From the winter of 1827, Eliza's notes became more brief. She no longer wrote about what it did, but simply recorded things that had passively occurred. The floors are polished, the windows are spotless. The grandfather clock in the hall has stopped again. By the spring of 1828, the entries stop, abruptly. The last line is written at the bottom of an otherwise empty page, with no punctuation. It has begun to tap its fingers in a rhythm. There are no further entries. The remaining pages of the notebook are completely blank. In the back cover of Eliza's notebook, a small slip of paper was found, hidden beneath the fabric lining. The slip was discovered by an archivist in 1962. On it are 3 words written in a strange hand, still not connected. The official return file was submitted on the 22nd of September, 1828. Everything on paper looked normal. The boy's ID number was Ward 9 Kelvin. The Carver family name was written in full, and it was confirmed the boy was healthy and without injury. The boy's name was left blank. However, in the section for the reason for return, there was only a single word, written in pencil, "suitable." This word was very strange. It was not an official reason for returning an orphan according to the regulations of the time. The usual reasons were illness or bad behavior. Suitable was not on the list at all. The parish clerk, Mr. Samuel Price, recorded the case as normal in his work ledger, but he also used red ink to write a small annotation next to the word "suitable." Incorrect wording. Need to ask the Carvers again. However, it seems no one ever asked them about this. The Carver family's return form has no signature at the bottom. Instead, a faint check mark, not in Clark Price's hand, is marked next to approved. Later, the main diocesan office in New Orleans sent a letter requesting that Natchez clarify the case. In his reply, Clark Price wrote, "The Carver family made no complaints. They described the child as quiet and not troublesome. Mr. Carver voluntarily requested the boy's return." Mrs. Carver offered no comment. The return was approved as it was conducted peacefully. It is noteworthy that in his letter, Clark Price never mentioned the word suitable. This suggests that the word may have been added to the form by someone later. Years later, when asked about the incident, Mr. Price swore that he did not remember ever writing or approving such a strange reason for return. His word was accepted, and no one investigated further. In 1895, the old records from Natchez were moved to the State Archive. In Ward 9 Kelvin's file, the word suitable had been crossed out by someone with a pencil. Instead, they wrote over it the words, "Reason unknown." A careful archivist discovered this and noted in the margin, "Red ink is still visible beneath the pencil marks. It seems someone deliberately changed it." In 1955, when historians used new technology to examine the form, they discovered that beneath the words "reason unknown," the impression of the original word "suitable" was still there. No other record in Mississippi throughout the 19th century used such a strange term. Researchers searched but could not find the word "suitable" used with this meaning in any legal or medical document of that era. On the back of the form, along a crease, there is a small line of text, written in a slanted hand with very faint ink. The handwriting does not resemble anyone else's. The line reads, "It does not grow, it only reflects." According to the file, after the Carvers returned him, the boy, now called Ezra Cole, was transferred to a new family in Vicksburg. This document was found in an old ledger from the Natchez almshouse. The receiving family was listed as George and Henrietta Lyles, Millers, residing at Lot 112, Riverfront Street. This is the first time the name Ezra Cole appears. The intake information section on the paperwork was left blank, suggesting this was an unusual transfer. The page also has a broken red wax seal, making the details unidentifiable. When historians checked the records in Vicksburg, they found no family named Lyles had ever lived there. There were no tax receipts, no land deeds, or any records of such a family. The ownership deed for Lot 112, the address listed on the transfer form, actually belonged to a widow named Anna Roosh. She had passed away years earlier, and the lot had been abandoned after a fire. It was never sold to anyone. In the city's land registry, the page with information about this lot had been torn in half. The remaining part ends abruptly, with a marginal note that reads, "Awaiting verification, no one presented." In March 1846, a census taker passed by that address. In his notebook he wrote, "Vacant lot. Only a charred foundation remains. Uninhabited." He drew a small diagram of the lot and wrote a single word on it, "Ruins." In his census form, the box for children fostered was initially checked, but was later crossed out hastily. A month later, a clerk at the Diocesan Child Placement Office in New Orleans filed a complaint regarding the arrangement for the Lyles family, citing failure to return the post-placement response form within the required 60 days. A note was attached to the child's file, stating, "Reassignment pending, awaiting confirmation of residence and/or contact." No confirmation ever arrived. The Natchez almshouse maintained that the child had been legally transferred. A letter in response to the clerk, filed under the signature of the almshouse's acting director, stated, "Delivery confirmed by carrier's log. Subject has left the parish's jurisdiction on the specified date. Further inquiries belong to the Vicksburg authorities." When that log was requested by the Vicksburg office, it could not be found. Only a payment stub remained. 2 pence issued to S. Plan Croft for delivery of 1 passenger, full route. No additional trips were recorded under that name for the entire year. Years later, a Warren Parish school register from the spring of 1846 lists a student, Ezra C., age 10, enrolled for 2 weeks at a rural school near the Yazoo River. The attendance sheet has his name only once. His line for the second week is crossed out, and beside it, another note in a different ink. Family relocated. The name Lyles was never written. The teacher's marginal note in the corner simply says, "Guardian unclear, uncertain if boy speaks." In a separate ledger, buried at the bottom of a surplus file in the parish clerk's office, an unsigned entry appears. In a section for invalidated land claims, it lists the Lyles lot, followed by a final entry, reclaimed by absence. The daguerreotype was discovered in 1958. During an inventory of parish records transferred from the Natchez Archives to the newly established Mississippi Department of Archives and History. It was found wedged between 2 pages of a cotton shipping ledger, inside an old leather pouch faintly stamped Carver 1825-28, and tied with a desiccated leather cord. The metallic portrait, about the size of a palm, shows a boy seated on a simple wooden chair, his right hand resting on his knee, his face directed forward. He wears a coarse spun shirt, its collar unpressed. There is no name, no date, no artist's mark on the front. On the copper back, under raking light, faint scratches of handwriting were revealed. A clerk's note in pencil reads, "Ward, 9 Kelvin or Ezra C., followed by a question mark etched with a different, sharp tool. Below that, a second hand in faded India ink wrote, "Photo from Carver House." No notation. The photographer's identity remained a mystery, until the wooden chair in the photo with a distinctive crack on its left leg was identified. In an 1826 sketch of the interior of a traveling studio, owned by a French artist named Jean-Luc Dubois, he was known to have operated along the Mississippi River. Before his boat and all his equipment were reported missing in a flash flood near Port Gibson, Dubois' records, if any existed, were also swept away by the river. When the daguerreotype was examined as part of a conservation initiative in 1965, an anomaly was noted. The polished silver surface showed no signs of tarnish, no scratches, or the chemical erosion typical of plates from that era. Even the edges of the copper plate, usually the first place to oxidize, were still bright. When exposed to cleaning solutions, the image was unaffected. X-ray analysis, conducted at Tulane University's metallurgy lab in 1968, found no signs of decay. Despite the plate having existed for over a century in Mississippi's humid climate, the physical report, filed under reference number M1825, included a passage, "The metallic surface shows no measurable degradation. The silver-mercury amalgam remains stable. There are no signs of galvanic corrosion or environmental impact. The crystalline structure of the image remains as it was upon creation." The analyst attached a handwritten note to the report. "The physical nature of this image is impossible. It does not decay." What puzzled archivists more than the perfect preservation was the image itself. When viewed under a microscope, the lines of the boy's face were impossibly sharp. The tightly pressed lips, a tiny mole beneath his left eye, a stray lock of hair across his forehead. His eyes, wide and direct, seemed to have an unusual depth, as if they were etched into the metal rather than an image captured by light. A lab assistant claimed that when he held the plate, he felt it grow slightly warm and emit a very faint, almost inaudible hum. He did not include this observation in his official report. A comparison was made with a second daguerreotype, the one attached to the 1845 Natchez prison record. The boy in both images was identical, the same seated posture, the same vacant stare, the same stray lock of hair on his forehead, but the second photograph, taken 20 years later, showed no signs of maturation. The collar was just as tight, the crease on the sleeve was in the same position. When both metal plates were placed side by side under a strong light, the original plate seemed to vibrate slightly. The second one did not. The lab technician conducted an acid corrosion test. The second plate corroded as expected. The original plate was unharmed. Its surface merely darkened temporarily, before brightening again. The technician resigned the following week. A handwritten note of his was found on his desk, with only one line, "It is not a record, it is an ongoing presence." The Natchez Parish Prison Intake Ledger for 1845 lists a juvenile inmate, under number 812, processed on the morning of May 9. The name entered is Ezra Cole, no middle name. The warden noted the charge as vagrancy and public disturbance near the wharf area. No resistance, no statement. Estimated age, 10. Height, 4 feet, 8 inches. Weight, 81 pounds. Skin, pale. Eyes, slate-colored. The arrest ledger has a handwritten note in the margin, a rarity for vagrant prisoners. Subject shows no emotion, completely silent but compliant with all orders. The intake form was attached with a newly taken daguerreotype, fixed with a drop of beeswax to the top corner of the page. The portrait, which has a faint scratch near the chin, shows a boy in a coarse spun shirt, his face slightly turned to the right, hands in his lap. Beneath the image, someone had written in India ink, "Photo taken at time of intake, metal plate stored separately." This handwriting did not match that of any wardens or clerks who worked at the prison that year. No identification papers accompanied the 1,845 prison file. The box for next of kin or guarantor was left empty. The boy, Ezra Cole, was held for 2 months before being classified as an incorrigible vagrant and transferred to the Woodville work camp for the indigent. A transfer order dated the 15th of July is signed by Warden John F. Harris and a local magistrate. The magistrate later swore he never signed that order, stating his signature had been forged. The J in his name was written with an unusual loop, not his style. At the Woodville work camp, the boy was assigned a straw pallet in the East Ward. A foreman's log describes him as utterly silent, never complains, works ceaselessly but eats very little, blinks when ordered. An additional note was written in the margin of the medical log: pulse slow but steady, skin cool to the touch, even in the Mississippi sun, does not sweat. He was not included in prayer sessions or reading lessons, but was assigned to cleaning and mending fishing nets. Records show no disciplinary infractions, no communication, no illness. A warden wrote in his monthly report, "He is present but does not exist. If not for his shadow on the ground, one might think he wasn't there." In November 1847, his name was struck from the work camp's registry. There was no report of escape, no release papers, no transfer order. In place of a final status entry was a large X, drawn in red beeswax. The only annotation, written in a shaky hand, reads, "File sealed, photograph retained." That daguerreotype remained in the file until 1968. When the State Archives conducted an inventory, an archivist noted that the metal image was untarnished. The accompanying paper had no mildew. The beeswax was still soft. When compared again to the photo from the Carver era, there was not a single difference. On the back of the 1,845 prison intake form, impressed so faintly it was almost imperceptible to the touch, were 4 words created not by ink but by pressure from some hard object. They read, "Existence confirmed, not life." The prisoner was recorded only under a number, 812. No last name, no origin, no other conviction records attached. His first record at the Woodville work camp, dated the 16th of July, 1845, notes his arrival from the Natchez prison. His age is listed as approximately 10. The entry describes him as mute, with passive behavior, and no history of trouble. The photograph attached to the file, kept in a small wooden frame on the warden's desk, showed a child sitting upright with a vacant stare, an image not uncommon in institutions for the poor at the time, except for one detail. The crease on his shirt collar perfectly matched the crease in the daguerreotype, taken 20 years earlier at the Carver mansion. The daily work log from the East Ward shows the boy never did anything on his own, without being ordered. The foreman changed with the seasons, but through entries written in 4 different hands, the description of him remained constant. No complaints, no noises, no sounds of any kind. A night shift foreman noted in his personal log, "It taps its fingers on the window frame when the fog comes up from the river. The rhythm is slow and steady." Another note, dated August 1846, reads, "It always stands still whenever the church bell in Natchez strikes 3 a.m. Its eyes are fixed on the river." The kitchen ledger shows the boy ate almost nothing. Plates of food were often returned untouched, or with only a few crumbs of bread crushed. He showed no signs of weight loss or weakness. Monthly health check forms from 1,847 note his weight had not changed since his arrival. A caregiver's marginal note reads, "Flesh is cold, firm to the touch, fingernails strangely clean." He later added in pencil, "Never saw it shiver. Even on the coldest nights, there was no clear sleep cycle." Despite numerous suggestions to transfer him to another facility, his status remained unchanged for over 2 years. Visiting ministers refused to work with him on the grounds of no soul to be saved. Doctors who visited the camp offered various diagnoses, from traumatic mutism to congenital idiocy to a strange form of waking. None of these diagnoses led to a change in his file status. The warden at the time, a man named Elias Vance, recorded in his 1847 annual report to the Natchez Parish that subject 812 remains without misconduct or incident. Still no next of kin. File reviewed monthly. Vance resigned the following spring. His successor, a man named Silas Thorne, later recounted in a private letter that when he tried to move 812 straw pallet during a clean-out in 1848, the straw had hardened and stuck to the wooden floor. When the pallet was lifted, a fine layer of river dust was discovered underneath, arranged in parallel lines, like tiny waves. He ordered the corner left alone. There is no official record of this incident. The final mention of 812 appears in a work assignment book from January 1849. A labor roster marks his spot as empty. His intake record remained in the file cabinet. No escape report was filed. No transfer order was processed. The line with his name in the ledger ends abruptly. Below his name, a note appears in red ink, starkly different from the black ink of the ledger. No release order, status maintained. When the records were centralized for archival in 1968, the Woodville Work Camp folder was missing the intake record for 812. Instead, archivists found an old brown envelope marked "Anonymous, Inactive." Inside was only a blank card. At the top of the card, impressed very lightly into the paper, as if written with a pen long ago, were 3 phrases: "Arrived, not departed, still under review." The Mississippi Office of History initiated a project in 1935 to identify irregular or incomplete parish and prison records using new methods, including chemical analysis of paper and ink. The file related to the boy was pulled due to its unexplained surname changes and the existence of the undamaged daguerreotypes. It had been catalogued under 3 different identifiers during its journey: Ward 9 Kelvin, Natchez Almshouse; Ezra Cole, Natchez Prison; and Inmate 812, Woodville Work Camp. These records had been consolidated in 1910 into a single file, but each page had inconsistencies in dates, ink types, and writing styles. The document analyst, Mr. Julian Blackwood, an expert in 19th century paper, was tasked with examining the handwriting samples for signs of forgery. His report, dated the 12th of October, 1935, began with a cautious observation: the documentation lacks consistency. However, it is the marginalia, the seemingly informal additions, that are most troubling. On the return form from the Carver House, dated the 21st of September, 1828, Blackwood identified 5 different handwriting styles. None showed a natural flow or rhythm. He noted, "Some of the scripts appear to mimic the style of clerks of the era, yet they lack the natural pressure fluctuations of a human hand." The note next to the reason for return, "unsuitable," seemed to imitate the florid script of Clark Samuel Price. But when compared to other documents he had signed, the ink pressure was inverted, heavier at the end of the strokes instead of the beginning. Another note at the bottom of the page, written in an angular script almost carved into the paper, read, "Noted, no life." Blackwood circled this line and wrote beside it, "Neither handwriting nor print, something mechanically produced, but without a source." Comparative documents from the Natchez Almshouse, kept in the same storage box, included signatures of clerks and ministers from the 1822nd. Every signature had been authenticated in 1888 during a parish land dispute. None of the verified signatures matched any of the notes in Ward 9 Kelvin's file. Not the delivery agents, not the administrators, not even the initials matched. Blackwood's note in the margin of his fourth report page reads, "If this is human writing, then these people wrote only once in the history of this county." Chemical tests revealed further anomalies. The ink used in the marginalia did not react to standard reagents. Oak gall ink, common in the South at the time, typically turns black when exposed to acid. These ink samples fizzed slightly and left a greenish residue. The archivist supervising the analysis recorded, "The ink of the annotations appears to have stained the paper fibers themselves, whereas the ink of the main text rests only on the surface." When Blackwood tried to trace the individuals named in the files, clerks, wardens, caregivers, he discovered a chaos. Names like Samuel Price or Elias Vance existed in other records, but their signatures in the boy's file did not match. Other names, like George Lyles, did not exist at all in any other state documents. John F. Harris, the Natchez prison warden who supposedly signed the 1,845 transfer order, had actually died of yellow fever in 1844, a year before he was alleged to have signed the document. Blackwood's final note, found clipped to the back cover of the analysis report, consisted of just 3 lines in his own sharp script, underlined twice. No records match, no writing repeats. Only the image is constant, and it does not write itself. The original adoption document, filed on the 4th of June, 1825, was one of the few documents processed that summer at the Natchez Parish Almshouse. It bore the usual elements: a child's code number, the parish reception stamp, the guardian's name, and the clerk's signature. That signature belonged to Samuel Price, a man who had diligently held the position for nearly 20 years. His signature, S. Price, appeared in black oak gall ink, clear and coherent. The paper used was rough sheepskin parchment, a common type in the southern colonies at the time, with no watermark. This entry was filed in the Parish Registry, Volume 2, page 47. The page lists the child only as male, origin unknown, quiet disposition, assigned to the Carver residence, under guardianship order number 14. An attached note in red ink reads, "Family suitability verified. Child's condition accepted." A few lines below, a final clerk's comment states, "Family had no further requests." This phrase, which was not standard parlance, was circled in pencil by an investigator during an 1898 review of parish land records. That review was conducted following allegations of document forgery in church land transactions. As part of the investigation, former clerks were summoned to authenticate their signatures. Price, by then elderly and living in seclusion in a small house on the outskirts of Natchez, submitted a sworn affidavit on May 11, 1898, in which he asserted, "I do not recall processing any case involving the Carvers. I never assigned a child to them. If my name appears on that document, it was not signed by my hand." Investigators compared his handwriting against baptismal certificates, slave sale contracts, and parish land records from the same period. His florid S, the firm period after his initial, and the crossbar on his P were all consistent across 54 of 54 samples examined. The signature on the Carver record was identical in every respect. The same slant, the same ink pressure. Price was shown a photographic copy of the record page. According to the investigating aid's notes, he stared at the signature for nearly 5 minutes, before saying softly, "I do not remember that family, but this is indeed my hand." When pressed on whether he could have forgotten the child, he replied, "This is not forgetting. This is an emptiness. I have processed thousands of records. This paper was never on my desk. I can feel a record when it passes through my hands. It has the weight of a soul." His affidavit was stamped and filed under the code Objection 04. The Carver file was not pulled from the archives. Instead, a note was added to the back cover of the registry. Signature authenticated. Memory questioned. The note was signed by an apprentice clerk, whose daughter would later disappear mysteriously near the Mississippi riverbank in 1905. No modifications were made to the original adoption record. It remained in the ledger, perfectly intact. Between the pages, one can still see faint impressions, where a pen nib had pressed down for too long, not forming letters, just repeated points of pressure. as if the hand that signed it was actually trying to sign something else, something deeper beneath the page. In August 1902, the old Natchez City Hall began to be demolished, to make way for a new structure. During the foundation digging, workers broke through an old brick fireplace, unused since after the Civil War. Inside the chimney, wedged tightly between soot and broken bricks, was a small tin box. Its edges warped by heat, but still intact. No label, no number. The lid was rusted shut. When pried open, the tin box contained a single object, a small, hand-stitched notebook, its spine nearly broken, with no title. The notebook had only 4 vellum pages. The first 3 were blank, with only yellowed stains from moisture. The 4th page contained a single, central, unadorned entry. Subject, male, Juvenile Carver. The line was written in a stiff, block-letter script. With no date or code number, the handwriting was even, emotionless, more like it was produced by a machine than a human hand. Below that line, under the heading Status, was only one phrase: suitability suspended. No signature, no other entries. The notebook was taken to the office of the mayor of Natchez for identification. He noted it in the city log, but marked it as extra-jurisdictional, a term for items that did not appear in any official record. In a private note, he commented, "Format unrecognized, not a valid document, not of parish origin." He did not destroy the notebook, however. Instead, it was placed back in its box and stored in the vault of the new city hall. Under relics, old fireplace. 10 years later, a historian studying the 1,828 Natchez almshouse registries discovered an anomaly. The standard ledger ended on page 98, but the binding contained 99 pages. The final page was blank, except for a faint ink bleed-through from the back. This ink formed the faint impressions of a rectangle, suggesting the page had once been pressed against a hard object for a long time. The historian's marginal note reads, "Final page does not match. Different paper stock." When the Carver file was pulled for re-examination, a black soot smudge was found on the lower left corner. The stain was inconsistent with the general condition of the other documents. Chemical analysis in 1942 confirmed the presence of oak wood ash residue, the same type of wood used to build the old city hall. A letter found in the 1902 construction company's archives included a handwritten complaint from one of the demolition workers. "Nobody told us there was an iron box in the chimney. Had to break the bricks to get it out. Didn't feel like metal. It was soft like wet leather, smelled of river mud inside, not old paper." The site foreman dismissed the complaint. The object was logged, boxed, and never mentioned again. There is no record of who placed the notebook in the chimney. There is no way to explain how it could have been sealed inside a solid brick structure, but someone wrote that entry, and someone, perhaps long before the city hall was even built, decided that suitability could be suspended, but never terminated. This account was never published. It lay in a sealed file in the diocesan archives until 1982, when a flood damaged the archival codes and it was accidentally brought out during a damage inventory. It was labeled only, "Warden E. Vance's Account of Inmate 812. The account is 4 pages long, handwritten but unsigned. Elias Vance had been the warden at the Woodville work camp for nearly a decade. He resigned abruptly in 1848 and lived in seclusion until his death. This account was found among his personal papers, written years later from an infirmary in New Orleans, where he was being treated for a tremor of the hands and nightly terrors. In his account, Vance describes in detail a prisoner transferred in on the 16th of July, 1845. The intake form listed no parents, but was attached with a daguerreotype that was unnervingly pristine and showed no signs of corrosion. The boy was described as around 10 years of age, silent, with no oppositional behavior. There was no prior record before the vagrancy charge that brought him to the camp. His housing was marked pending assignment, a status Vance admitted he created himself for those he did not know what to do with. That status never changed during the boy's entire stay. Vance wrote, "It was not a burden. It did not speak. It did not fight. But no one came for it. No family claimed it. No minister would speak to it. Every month, I had to write a report on it, and every month, I wondered where it came from. The river never gave me an answer, but in the winter of 1848, according to Vance's account, something changed. The boy, known only as 812, had been taken to the infirmary after not moving for 3 straight days. A caregiver reported that he was tapping his fingers on the wooden floor. He couldn't understand the rhythm. When Vance came and ordered him to stop, the boy didn't move his hand. Instead, he looked directly at Vance and blinked, continuously, 81 times. The caregiver had counted silently. When he finished counting, he dropped his lantern. "I thought it had a fever," Vance wrote. "But it was not warm. It just stared at me. I don't know what I saw in those eyes, but I wrote in the ledger that it had been adopted by a family in Yazoo City. It never left. I just couldn't keep seeing it every day, without an answer." That night, Vance couldn't sleep for the sound of the river water, which seemed to be whispering a number. A week later, the boy's line in the registry ends, without explanation, no release papers, no transfer note, just a blank space, and a line stamped with a homemade seal, "File closed." In the margin of the last page of Vance's account, there is a handwritten note, in a strange blue ink that does not match his script. It was not a rhythm, it was a coordinate. No one ever deciphered what 81 meant. No other inmate at Woodville was ever listed as pending assignment, and the blue ink did not match any type manufactured in Mississippi or neighboring states during that century. The administrative language of 19th century charitable institutions was often exclusionary and simplistic. Terms like deaf, mute, dullard, or indigent were used to categorize and contain, rather than to understand. Yet, none of these categories truly fit the boy returned by the Carver family. In his return file, dated the 22nd of September, 1828, the supervising minister had marked all 3 standard items: intellectual capacity, moral disposition, and future prognosis. With the same symbol, a simple horizontal line, a dash typically meant information was unavailable. Less common was its repetition across 3 different documents from the Carvers, the Natchez prison, and the Woodville work camp, each written by a different hand, but bearing the identical mark. In the Natchez almshouse registry for 1829, the boy appears again. In a special list titled Pending Cases, 12 names were listed. 11 were eventually adopted or died. Only Ward 9 Kelvin remained. His file was stamped annually with a note, "Re-evaluation requested," but no evaluation was ever performed. A handwritten note in the margin of the 1831 list reads, "Still on the books, still pending, still not speaking." The absence of any observable expression, no sadness, no anger, even his silence was not defiant, placed him outside all systems of classification. He was not helped, not because he was a difficult case, but because no process was designed to handle a case like his. In 1850, with changes in state pauper laws, a medical board reviewed old records. The boy's case was placed in a provisional category, stagnant subject, status undetermined. In his report, one board member, Dr. Alistair Finch, a coincidental surname, wrote, "The subject does not respond to sound but is not deaf, does not resist but cannot be instructed. Heart rate does not change when startled. This condition is neither illness nor willfulness. He is not empty, he is not static, he is simply out of sync." The last line of his report was crossed out in ink, but beneath it, one could still faintly read, "It taps its fingers to the flow." When Mississippi passed the Pauper and Vagrant Act of 1855, hundreds of cases were processed or closed. Ward 9 Kelvin's file was marked, "Reviewed, no action required." By that point, he had not spoken, shown emotion, or taken any recordable action for nearly 30 years. Yet he persisted in the system. An addendum to that act added a strange clause. Subjects who exhibit neither development nor decay, with no discernible illness, shall be maintained on the books until a marked change justifies reclassification. It was a clause that seemed written for only one person. It was removed in the next version of the law. When historians from the University of Mississippi tried to find the boy's final record in 1948, they found a folder with only 2 stamps, unclassifiable and no Examination required. Inside, the only text was a note from an unknown doctor, scrawled in the paper's crease. Still exists, but we cannot say how. The historian who found this folder was originally searching for cadastral maps from the 1852nd. The Natchez archives had been devastated by a major Mississippi River flood decades earlier, and many documents had been hastily boxed and forgotten. Box 38 Ampere had no list of contents. Inside was a transfer envelope, marked with a standard, "No one recognized." Mississippi Parish Recirculation Protocol. The paper was not yellowed, the ink not smudged. Though it was pulled from a stack of mildewed files, it had no seal, no signature. Just a date, the 17th of November, 1912. And a name, Carver. It was not the boy's name, it was the name of the first family. The words Carver, return subject, were written in block capitals at the top, followed by the phrase, suitability unresolved. There was no date of birth, no code number. Where the recipient's address should have been, the form simply read, "Return to the flow." The script was not handwriting, but block print, stiff and inconsistent with any other document from the era. More alarming than the form's content was the authentication seal, stamped at the bottom. Every parish transfer document required final approval from an auxiliary bishop. The seal read, "Approved. Bishop A.D. Dubois, Diocese of Mississippi." Bishop Dubois had served in that position from 1878 to 1891 and had died of yellow fever in August 1894. His death certificate, filed at St. Mary Basilica, confirms his burial on the 22nd of August, 1894. Yet, the approval seal on the form was dated the 17th of November, 1912, 18 years after Bishop Dubois' death. The ink used, when tested decades later, was found to contain high concentrations of lampblack and a binder made from fish scales, a common ink recipe in Louisiana that had fallen out of use by the 1862nd. No later diocesan seals bear traces of this ink. An internal note attached to the form by a bewildered pastor in 1949 asked whether the record should be destroyed or sent to Rome for review. There is no record of a reply. The only note on the back of the document is a single line in pencil: "If it returns, start over. Do not let it complete the loop." The phrase, "complete the loop," does not appear in any canonical documents of the period. When the historian who found the document tried to photograph it in 1965, his camera failed. The flash went off, but the film was completely transparent. The Photo Lab's report noted a strange comment: "Exposure failure. Film did not register light," as if the lens was aimed at a void. In 1978, when the Mississippi Department of Archives and History began microfilming 19th century records, a clerk discovered a series of entries that could not be indexed consistently. Carver, Cole, 812. Unlike standard records, this trio of names appeared repeatedly in parish registries, prison archives, and land ledgers along the Mississippi River. The file code seemed to change, but the core details remained constant. The file's location constantly shifted between classifications, without explanation. Sometimes it was marked transferred, other times pending or kundang jalai. Not once was it marked deceased. The file had more handwritten notes and amendments than any other from that period in Mississippi, yet no census ever listed the boy, no school enrolled him long-term, and no burial record closed his case. His age was last recorded as approximately 10 in 1845, after which the entry was left blank. A note in red ink in the margin of one document simply reads, "Maintain status until change occurs." No one initialed it. An internal diocesan report from 1922 described the file as a permanently inactive record. When reviewed in 1950, a historian noted, "This file seems to exist not out of administrative need, but out of a certain inertia." By 1965, a line in a state archive inventory report declared, "This subject is referenced in other files, but has no original record." When compared to other cases, this file had a unique characteristic: circulation. Its documents were copied, moved, and cross-referenced over 80 times from 1,825 to 1,960. Most records were moved only once or twice. His file moved on average every 5 years. No official request explained these movements. No official signed off on them. Some clerks' offices even noted they never received the physical document, but created a new entry anyway, citing the reason to sync with neighboring parishes. A note from a clerk in Vicksburg, dated April 1908, includes a hastily written line: "This file has surfaced again. Just leave it here this time." Some believed it was a ghost file, a clerical error that refused to be deleted. Others suggested a clerk had used the number as a placeholder for unidentified cases. But when a local historian cross-referenced the Carver coal file with work camp registries from 1,845 to 1,849, he found more than just names. He found a second daguerreotype. It was an exact match to the one found in the Carver's ledger. Unaged, uncorroded, indistinguishable, the same boy, unchanged over 20 years. In a failed attempt to purge inactive records in 1981, the State Archives' early computer system repeatedly errored out when scanning this file. Access error, record in use. The technical department marked it as a software glitch. But on the error printout, below the line of code, a sentence appeared that no one on the programming team claimed to have written. "The flow is not erased. It is being rerouted." The last physical folder, believed to be his, arrived mysteriously in an unlabeled crate of records from a demolished church in Port Gibson in 1985. It had no number, only a black silk ribbon tied around it. Inside were 12 vellum sheets, all blank, separated by dried bay leaves, seemingly undisturbed for over a century. No dates, no names, no notes. Just the stillness of captured time. It wasn't until a re-inventory in 1994 that the contents were closely examined. An archivist named Lena Dubois, another surname coincidence, held one of the blank sheets under an ultraviolet light. Along the bottom edge of the paper, a faint glow appeared. Under a microscope, a single phrase materialized, written in a microscopic script, still flowing. There was no ink, no signature. The sentence seemed to be woven into the very fibers of the paper. Chemical analysis found nothing. The lab returned the sheet with a note: "No foreign agents." The paper fibers have rearranged themselves into this shape. This single phrase, this single line, launched an internal investigation. Though no one could determine the folder's origin, it had no entry in Mississippi's archival system, and had clearly not been sent through official channels. One theory suggested it had been mixed in from a Louisiana parish, but this type of vellum was only produced in Natchez until about 1840. Another theory posited it was a fake record, created to cover up some crime. But that theory didn't explain the stains. On each dried bay leaf, in the exact same spot, was a faint, circular stain, the size of a child's fingertip. Analysis revealed it to be silt residue from the Mississippi River. Most disturbingly, the stains repeated on every single leaf, in the same position, at the same angle, as if a muddy finger had touched them again and again, over many years. A 1995 memo from the archive director, Samuel Peters, records his experience during a late night at work. "This folder," he wrote, "has an unusual weight. When he lifted it to place it in a sealed box, he described a feeling of cold dampness, as if I was lifting a wet stone from a riverbed, not a file of paper." Peters took an early retirement the following month. His resignation letter contained a single sentence: "What cannot be archived cannot be forgotten." Attempts to photograph the folder failed. Each picture produced only a dull gray, as if shooting into a thick fog. When scanned in 2003, the digital scanner crashed. It repeatedly errored, displaying on the screen a repeating line of text: "Awaiting flow, awaiting flow, awaiting flow." No error code was logged to explain this message. That folder now sits in a sealed tin box, stored in the deepest vault of the archives. Opening the box requires permission from the current bishop and a historian appointed by the Mississippi River Historical Society. On the lid of the tin, etched by an unsteady hand below the state seal, is a phrase that has never appeared in any document before. It reads, "Do not drain the river." It is still being told. It was adopted, returned, named, incarcerated, and forgotten. Yet nowhere in the archives of Mississippi is there a record of it dying. Its file never closed, its age never changed, and in an old chimney in Natchez, a buried notebook still holds the name of the first family that touched it. What was it? A child left by the river, a failure of the administrative system, or something created by that very system, fed by paper, circulated by mortal hands, and remembered only by mud stains that never dry? This is not a ghost story. This is the story of a system that forgot how to forget, and a boy it should never have processed. Like the video, and subscribe for more stories that history has tried to bury. And if you're still watching, let me know where you're from and what time it is. There's a comfort in knowing we're not alone.